Being a human is complicated and complex, and it requires you to acknowledge a series of emotional discomforts, of possible psychological mysteries, and most of all, relationships with people and your environment, as well as the system of reality in place. When we look at what it means to be a human, you could probably come up with a million definitions, a million different aspects to what it means to exist on Earth or whatever else. But what I'm mostly referring to is how do we make the most of the system that is in place? The system that is the human mind, the system of what we know about reality so far, and how can we take the most control over our experience and make it more pleasant than miserable? And that's the pretty simple way to encapsulate a very difficult topic. And I think it starts with number one is realizing the nature of the self. That when we're born, we are given a name. And as we grow up, we are sort of buying into a certain character that we play in society. So we play a character in our family dynamics. We play a character in our social dynamics with friends. We play a character at school. And for some, this character varies depending on the setting. And for most others, it stays relatively consistent. And the biggest wake-up call, and a lot of people, I guess, call this an ego death, but it's realizing that the nature of the self is really just an idea. That who you are, fundamentally, is just a human, a breathing human. You have your breath, and you have the knowledge that you exist right now. Everything else is an idea. When people are first met with this fact, the fact that identity is not a set in stone nature of reality, and that if you were dropped in the middle of the woods with absolutely nothing and no one, who would you be? You would just be a human in the woods. That is it. When we start there, we can start to see that the nature of each person and the characteristics of an individual is dependent on their environment when they were a child, and the way that they see the world, the way that they think about themselves and the people around them in the world is only and pretty much primarily dependent on what they were told and what they saw growing up. We'll come back to that concept at a later point. And the second sort of thing I think we need to acknowledge almost immediately in the human experience is that what are we left with when we investigate the nature of who we are? And the answer, depending on how deep you take it, is we are left with nothingness. In reality, that's all we're left with. We're left with the awareness that we exist, and that is it. The very presence of who we are. Because you can observe your thoughts. Your thoughts are not yours. They are the mind. If you were never taught language, you would not think in thoughts. If you were blind and you never saw the things that you did, you would not be able to think of the visual imagery that you do in your mind. So though those thought forms would still exist, they would exist in a very different way, and it's completely dependent on outside factors, so it is not a signifier of identity. You can observe and process your emotions. Your emotions are not you. They are a bodily and psychological reaction to what occurs outside of us. So this is also to do with the body, to do with the connection between mind and body. These are things we don't have to get too carried away with. We can have thoughts, we can have emotions, and we can acknowledge them as a part of us without seeing them as the true nature and essence of our identity. So who is a human? A human is not their anger, their sadness, their happiness, their joy. A human is not their thoughts that they have that no one else can see or hear. But rather, a human is what they bring to the table of life. So more than anything else, if we were to be defined by anything, it would be our actions. And that takes us into phase 3. Once we investigate the self, once we look at the self and realize we are left with nothingness, we are left with only the awareness of the present moment, we see that our only choice now is to transform the self and bring actions to the table in which we can influence reality. And that takes us to the next part, which is our relationship with our environment, our relationship with the world. A person, a human, especially moving into adulthood, will certainly realize that the world that they're living in their head, is completely fictional and imaginary, and it doesn't matter. To be a productive member, to make things in this life, to create opportunities and doors for yourself, you need to take action. You need to move and project yourself through the actions that you take. When a person becomes stuck, they often become stuck because they're identifying more with the imaginary world that they've created in their mind rather than taking action and learning from the cause and effect of those actions in reality. Being a human isn't necessarily about thoughts and emotions, but it is about learning from our inner experience, and more so, transforming our outer world through transforming our inner world. So by creating, for example, a tolerance to discomfort, uncomfortable situations, to anxiety, we make our world more peaceful. So someone who is unaware would look to battle anxiety, would look to battle discomfort by trying to control the outside world. But controlling the outside world won't bring you that peace and relaxation that you're looking for. It's only going to cause you more frustration. Because trying to control the outside world is like trying to control the ocean. You have no power over it. The only thing you can ever control is what occurs inside of you. And though the world that we imagine in our minds is imaginary, the effect of transforming our inner state of being, and that state of being projecting itself through our actions, through our choices and our decisions that we make in life, that is real. And that's the important distinguishing factor that we need to make when we look at the process of healing and the journey of sort of an evolution of who we are. Once I started realizing that the mind operates like a computer and our conscious awareness is the programmer of that computer, everything changes. Or rather, for me, everything changed. Because you see that the mind, to feed it an algorithm, to feed it a certain code, you would just have to input the correct actions. Because there is something called neuroplasticity, where the mind learns from new experiences and can literally reformulate itself upon those new experiences. So if we want our mind to send different thoughts, if we want to have a different relationship with our emotions, if we want to have a different confidence, lower anxiety levels, anything, if we want to change the fabric and the feedback of our mind in communication with our awareness, we need to input the correct actions to teach the mind who we are as a character. This comes back to the idea of no self, because since there is no solidified self, we can create a self that better suits our evolution and our happiness in the world. And to create that self, we have to input the code that our brain understands and is looking for. That code is repeated actions. So before you walk into a room with confidence, you need to behave as if that confidence was already yours. And investigate what's standing in your way. What's standing in your way is the tension, the awkwardness, and the fear of being perceived as something you are not. But this is just a trade-off you're going to have to make, because many people live their lives fearing the opinions of others and giving into fear in all sorts of ways. But this is the trade-off. You trade off the not knowing if people are judging you. You trade the unbearable feeling and discomfort of fear for a life that you've always wanted and for a version of yourself that you feel really good and happy with. If you want to speak with more charisma, If you want to project your opinion and not shy away from difficult conversations, you need to embody those qualities before you actually have them. You have to fake it till you make it. And this isn't inauthentic, because what self do you owe loyalty to? Do you owe loyalty to who you were when you were 5 years old, 10 years old, 15? Who you were 5 years ago? Who you're going to be 5 or 10 years from now? Who do you owe loyalty in terms of who you are if who you are is always changing? If you don't take that change into your own hands, you're going to sort of live out the unconscious system, the unconscious path. And this has been written about in many spiritual texts. And that is, there's two pathways for each human. And this is something I have an opinion on. I can't say that this is a systematic fact of reality, because we know neuroplasticity is real. We know that is proof. But in my opinion, there are two paths that the human can experience. That is the conscious awakened path and the unconscious sort of karmic path. The unconscious karmic path is generational trauma being manifested again in you. It's the same old anxieties, the same old fears. It's playing it safe. It's never really going for what you want. If there were a destiny that were put forward for you from the moment that you were born, it would be the result of that unconscious path, that karmic path. So you live your life in a way where you are constantly meeting up to the expectations of other people, meeting up to the expectations of a fearful and anxious mind. You're kind of just going with the wind, and not in a present flowing sort of way. You're going with the wind as in you never question the nature of your path, you just walk it. And then there's the other path, the conscious awakened path, the riskier one, the unknown one, but equally the healing and breaking generational trauma one. Our body holds our ancestors in us. Years and years of evolution, of generational events that have occurred, of fear that has been stored in the body. Our bodies are intelligent beyond belief. And the only way that we can undo and rewire the path of not only ourselves, but of those who will come after us, is to face and heal the darkness that exists inside of us. And some will have more darkness and some will have less. But equally so, we all have a responsibility to face that darkness and to not give in and allow it to deter our path in a way where we're always making the safe and avoidant choices. Being a human can mean many things. In my opinion, for the most of it, or for the grand scheme of all that is, it means experiencing the life that you were given. So, from what we know, we may have not had a choice in who we are, in the settings that we were born in our environment, in the people that we were surrounded with. But we do have a choice now as a result of being given life. We couldn't control the hands that we were dealt, but we can absolutely control how we play them. And I think that that's the whole point. The point was never to change absolutely everything, but the point was to change ourselves and external reality, and the opportunities we are met with will change as a result of that. As a result of our inner transformation, as a result of cultivating emotional freedom, overcoming all of our trauma, all of our baggage, facing and healing all of our darkness, as a result of that, external reality will react in a synchronistic way. And that's what we experience when we finally start taking the conscious path. We start experiencing synchronicities in the flow of life. We exist in the present moment. Being a human could have and has meant many different things for many different years. If you were to go back in time, being a human meant just being another sort of animal or primate in the animal kingdom, hunting, surviving, foraging. But now we've evolved so much through technology and even cognitively and emotionally that we are left with the unbearing questions of why? Why do we exist? What is our purpose? We have many philosophies, We have many spiritual answers for this. But the true answer is that we don't know. We don't know. And part of being a human is finding a way to come to terms and make peace with the fact that we don't know. If we are ever to exist in peace, or if we are ever to exist in happiness, it's not going to be found in forever climbing the ladder trying to find the answer to these questions. It's going to be found in peace alongside the questions, in happiness alongside the questions, appreciating and experiencing the moment for what it is without knowing the end result of all that is. And in the modern world, we need a practice such as detachment, the law of detachment, where we're not constantly controlling and expecting many things from people or experiences. But again, we're pointing ourselves back to that inner transformation, and that when our purpose is our state of being, and that our purpose is emotional freedom and what we can cultivate within ourselves, then everything around us is set ablaze in a very spiritual sort of way. We have to let go of trying to control other people. We have to let go of trying to control circumstances, because this is also an unconscious path. We'll see our unconscious trauma, whether it's generational or newfound. We will see this trauma sort of reflected in the way we engage with other people. If we're constantly trying to control other people, we need to learn to let go. If we're always trying to avoid attachment or whatever else, then we need to learn to trust in relationships. But again, relationships are complicated and complex. And I don't think the nature of being a human is necessarily about understanding everything, but it's in understanding ourselves. It's in understanding our psychology, our brain, everything about our body, everything, how it's all connected, everything, our nervous system, everything. It's about understanding it all. And through understanding ourselves, we will start to form an understanding of reality and the universe as well, because we are reflected in that. The greatest teacher is ourselves, not because we hold the knowledge to teach ourselves, but simply because the schooling and the sort of classroom that we find ourselves in is actually just who we are. It's the cards that we were dealt. It's the psychological framework we've been born into. So the anxieties, the fears, the traumas, everything that you have, the darkness, everything, healing that, overcoming that will teach you what you need to know about reality. Healing ourselves will teach us about other people. So we are the greatest teacher, not because we know already, but because through liberating ourselves, the answers we were looking for will come. And even then, we won't be able to say that we know, but we'll be able to say that we understand ourselves. We were able to code our minds like the computer it is. We will be able to observe and be free of our thoughts. We will be able to let emotions pass over us. And I know the lingering question is how? How do we do this? And this is where I think one word comes to mind, and that is welcome. Welcome to being a human, to figuring out how we can implement neuroplasticity, figuring out how we can deal with our emotions. And of course, I made videos about this. You can go through my channel and I kind of show and teach about my experiences and how I've been able to cultivate states of being. And even though I'm still learning, I'm still growing, I think part of being a human is understanding that's where the journey begins. And if we can aim our sights at a sort of inner state of being liberation, if we can aim our sights at an emotional freedom, and that through conquering ourselves and mastering ourselves, we can then have a great influence and more control over our reality. I think that is the main point of the human experience. And everything that comes as a result of that, all the dances and laughs and tears and everything else that comes in our life as a result of that inner transformation, that is the sort of point of it all. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. If you're listening on Spotify, thank you as always. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.